What's up and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, your weekly look what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan. I'm here with my co-host, Dave Martinson. Dave, you buying that Mahershala Ali stock?
Oh yeah, dog. To the Ozarks. Let's go.
Man, I was really pumped to see the trailer for season 3 of True Detective come out. Mahershala, I think it was the only big star cast, especially after season 2 where they cast Vince Vaughn, Taylor Kitsch,
Adams and
yeah,
Colin
Rachel
Farrell.
McAdams. Yeah, I was expecting to see a lot more. Seems like they're just gonna let him ride this out with a 2 timeline type story, which I'm really excited about. Get to see Mahershala kind of ball out. What was your impression from the trailer?
Yeah, the 2 timeline thing stands out. Remember, True Detective season 1 had that. But yeah, it's going to be his vehicle, and that's dope. I don't care how similar it is to the first season. It doesn't really matter. I hope it's a cool crime show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially after Moonlight and just the year he had, what was that, 2 years ago now?
2016, yeah.
2016. You got to let Mahershala shine, and I think he's going to kill it. So I'm excited to have that back in our live starting January 2018, and that will definitely be on our 2019. Yeah, and previewing our 2019, what we're looking forward to. We got lots to get to today, though. Before we do, subscribe somewhere down below. Follow us on YouTube. Obviously, if you're watching us on YouTube, you are, hopefully. Also, SoundCloud.com/NowstalgiaPod and NowstalgiaPod on Twitter. Give us all the feedback. We appreciate it. You've been alluding to this for a couple weeks, busting my balls a bit for seeing them in concert a couple of years ago. Interpol with that, 6th album?
Marauder.
An interesting idea for this album. Apparently, it's a concept album where it's about some guy who is. I actually didn't even write this down because I thought it was such a boring idea for a concept album. But it's like some guy who's like traveling and just writing down his introspections about society. Yeah, I don't know. Interpol. Just to kind of like give a brief background. What's your relationship with Interpol, Dave? Do you even have one?
I don't have one.
No.
I just know of their lineage as one of those early aughts New York rock bands. We've talked about that here and there. Were they in the Welcome to the Bathroom book? Or
they were
focused on the other bands? Were they mentioned in that?
Yeah, no, they talked about them in there. If it focused a lot on the Strokes, but it touched on a couple of other bands. I read it mostly for the and LCD Sound System. James Murphy was featured pretty prominently in there. They broke out in 2002 with Turn On the Bright Lights, with songs like PDA and Obstacle One, that their fans really ride for. But the thing about Interpol is that though they've tried to tweak their sound here and there, I find a lot of their music to be very similar sounding and homogeneous. And I kind of felt the same with this album. There were a couple times when I heard songs that stood out as, wow, that was something different. But for the most part, I found this album pretty boring and pretty similar all the way through. Anything that stood out to you about this?
No, not really. I thought the vocals were pretty rote, pretty, like you said. I think boring is a great way to put it. It's just nothing really pops on the record. It's just kind of there, And I mean, did you think like the instrumentation was at least really good? Like the vocals didn't do much for me. They didn't really stand out at all, and I don't really care what the concept is if I'm not engaged to listen, But I mean, did you like the guitar on this or anything?
It's actually interesting because I like I said, I think I find their sound very similar in a lot of their songs, especially their guitars often feel similar. A lot of like either like slow guitars, like something like Rest My Chemistry, where it's just kind of building this vibe more than actually standing out for how it's being played, or it's like this kind of like choppy, like na 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 like type noise for some of them, for some of their more upbeat songs. The songs that stood out to me most on this were songs like I don't know, like Party's Over. Like the vocal distortion on that stood out, like the guitar opening to Number 10, and also Probably Matters had like a very jazzier sound to close out the album, which I thought was actually a pretty interesting track, and it's nice to hear them like incorporating horns and stuff more into their music. Some encouragement for maybe a different or more interesting album in the future, but for the most I didn't find anything about this exceptional or anything that really stood out.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of toyed with if we were going to talk about this one, and as long as we were hyped about it, I don't think really anyone was like super jazzed about a new Interpol record, and that's probably why.
we put a song from most of the albums we talk about on our Spotify playlist, which goes Spotify Nowstalgia Best of 2018. Give that a follow. I don't even think there's a song on this I'd want to put on there. It doesn't do it justice to our playlist to put on a best of playlist. So something I liked a lot more though was a week ago, Death Cab for Cutie released their 9th album. Thank You for Today. Ben Gibbard, known famously for Death Cab for Cutie, also for Postal Service back in the early 2000s. Really talented musician, but the band's kind of fallen off a bit since I don't know, last like 10 years or so. This decade really hasn't been good to Death Cab. Obviously, like Transcendentalism and some of their other records from the early 2000s Transatlanticism, sorry, are very famous and very well known, and people really ride with those songs. But band's kind of lost some of their luster. Thank You for Today, though. Some of the singles were encouraging. Dave, what was your take on the singles and then just the album in general?
Oh yeah, so I thought this was much easier to listen to just because it's an album that doesn't demand anything from you. Right. It's very unoffensive, very undemanding, very fluffy, very inessential. It's you get out of it what you put into it, I guess, right? Like it doesn't ask much as you as a listener. So I thought it was, really, really easy, breezy listen, much more enjoyable than Interpol for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's actually, that's a plus for Death Cab. That's easier to listen to, but I think that actually almost in a way underscores the actual talent that this band has. After King Segui, which was their last album, came out, people were kind of worried about them because Chris Walla, their longtime bandmate and producer, had left the band, and it was noticeable that the album just kind of fell flat and that there wasn't really a lot behind it. And especially because Ben Gibbard was like, we're gonna remake the band and we're gonna try different things, and then it kind of came out and seemed very uninspired. I think there's a lot more in this, and they take a lot more chances. Like even Gold Rush, like a song like kind of a different sounding Death Cab for Cutie single. It has like a twang to it, almost like a country type noise in the background. That's, I think, makes it really interesting. I also found like Autumn Love, their second single, to be a pretty interesting song, like the way that the chorus kind of builds up with like the guitars kind of right before it. And then I don't know, I think Your Hurricane is probably my favorite song on the album. It sounds kind of like classic Death Cab, which I'm talking about all these changes that they made, but I think when they can hit that sweet spot of what Death Cab used to be on something like Transatlanticism, this is Your Hurricane is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, no, I think it's my problem with a lot of indie rock is when it's too self-serious, and this is not that. It wasn't as ambitious as the earlier records, but given the run they've been on, that's probably a good soft reboot for the band, I guess.
Yeah, definitely, and it's gotten more positive reviews in the more recent work, so it's definitely a good direction for them. Just out of curiosity, what'd you make of that last song, 60 and Punk?
What do you mean?
So it hasn't come out who Ben Gibbard is writing this in reference to. He's obviously talking about some star. I'm not really asking who you think it's about, but it's about him looking back at this, like rock star, and kind of like the line that hits things home in it is like, were you happier when you were poor? And a lot of people are thinking maybe Ben Gibbard is kind of looking at this, and that's like a introspective look at his career and where he's at. What was your take on the song, or did you really not catch it?
No, you're right to me. No, I think that's actually pretty cool. It's it's taking a stab at something. So
yeah,
at the very worst, even if it doesn't like jump out at me sonically like anything else did, I think that's still cool lyrics.
Definitely. Give this record a listen. I recommend it. It's not going to be anyone's best of list, I wouldn't think, but there's a lot there to like. Another song I just wanted to shout out, When We Drive was probably the lowest point because that might be the most boring song I've ever heard. I'm not even kidding. That song was just nothingness, just gross. So skip over that one, but listen to the rest. Definitely a lot there. Someone who's definitely not boring, but this album was, or this mixtape, or however you want to put it, this project, not as exciting as his first one. Your guy Aminé. So talk to me about 1.5.
No, I think you nailed it. It's spoilers. 1.5 isn't as good for you. His debut album from last year, and I think the big reason that is what were Aminé's strengths we talked about last year. You know, remember he blew up with Caroline, and he kind of followed that up with a record that is similar to Caroline's strengths, right? It's really upbeat and positive, and also quite introspective at times, right? And you know, also fun to listen to, right? Like I thought, like Spice Girl was a really good album cut from that, and you know, Aminé from after Good For You comes out, we're like, all right, yeah, Caroline wasn't a one-hit wonder. This dude actually really seems to care about the work he puts in, putting on for Portland, which is really cool to see, just because that's not a big or hot rap scene or anything, and you know, he's coming at rap in a different way. He's not, you know, it's very original production, whatnot. And then he kind of leading up into this 1.5 project, he was kind of like becoming like everyone else. It seemed like I just found this sounding so generic, and it's like Aminé was clowning like materialism on Good For You, and then he's making like generic like trap flavored songs on 1.5, and I'm like, nothing about this stands out, and you're also not as good at it as other people that do that all the time. So wasn't really sure like the intent behind this. I guess he'll want to just make these songs, throw them out there. I won't judge it as much as if it was like a true album follow-up, but yeah, I thought it was an interesting like you know, left turn for him after what Good For You was.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot to like in here. Like I think the production's really interesting and the beats are still really good. After Caroline went platinum, I think Aminé reached this level of fame that he probably didn't even imagine he was going to rise to this quickly. And I think he tries to take some of the things he does very well on Good For You, which he has these introspective lyrics and talks about things, and he can get pretty deep on that album at times. But he tries to do it here in almost like a more mature way, I say, quote unquote. Or just a different way. Maybe he's trying to find an equilibrium because he probably feels like he can't keep up that like optimistic, upbeat feel all the time. And I think probably his sophomore record, whenever that comes out proper, is going to be somewhere in between. He's got to recapture that magic while also trying to bring things down a notch, because no one can be that positive all the time. I don't know. You know, Dr. Whoever and Why were probably the songs that stood out to me on this. And I know, yeah, I think you feel the same. But yeah, it's just, there's a lot here that I'm just disappointed by.
Yeah, it's funny because it kind of reminds me of Yachty's trajectory, where he starts out really positive and really like bubbly, and then he kind of like doubles down on just making trap recently with Little Bo too. And that seemed almost like a response to his critics, whereas Aminé just seems like he just fucking wanted to make music like this, you know? It was interesting, but it's like you listen, it's like the second song, Hiccup, like I would never expect Aminé to be on a song with Gunna. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
You know? I mean, playing a song with Rico Nasty towards the end. Rico's really dope. That's a lot better. But I think he wanted to maybe flex a little bit. I don't know, but it's fine, you know?
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that this is just a project that he dropped out of nowhere. So this is the sort of thing where, worst comes to worst, this is just a blip in the radar, and hopefully a sophomore album is way better. So Dave, why don't we jump into Sharp Objects, a show that we talked about, I think, after the first episode, maybe first couple, and then we haven't really come back to. But it wrapped up last night, 8-episode mini-series starring Amy Adams, Chris Messina, Patricia Clarkson, Eliza Scanlon played Amma in this. There's a lot to dig into here, especially if you want to talk about how that finale ended. But why don't we just give our general thoughts of the show overall? Like, what did you like about it, or what didn't work for you?
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's actually become quite the polarizing show in terms of people having time for it or not, the lack thereof. Um, I think the mood, the vibe the show has and had throughout the whole run, the whole 8 episodes, was pretty strong. I think what's cool about it is that it doesn't really feel like other mystery shows, other crime shows. Jean-Marc Vallée's editing and cut was pretty cool for the most part. I thought sometimes the flashbacks were a little obtuse and unnecessary, but it was a show I didn't expect to need to be really paying attention to. Because there's a lot of stuff that you would miss if you're only casually paying attention. But I did find that as the series went on, that I was not as engaged with the characters, and thus found the show's lack of interest in the plot was less entertaining to me personally.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's admirable to tell a story that is really less about the MacGuffin of the murder. And again, it's an adaptation from a novel, but again, I think that's admirable for storytelling. But I personally wasn't entertained, wasn't as engaged, because I just really couldn't get into the characters, and I felt like the hazy vibe that the show had almost detracted from that. It made it hard for me to continually be invested in what was happening or not happening. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up some interesting points, especially, you talked about how the vibe of the show was really kind of like the star of it. Amy Adams was amazing as always, and Eliza Scanlon I thought was also fantastic for this being her first major role. But I do think, we talk about shows like Mr. Robot or Legion, shows that really are kind of out there, even Fargo in some of the things that they do, they're kind of out there, but we laud them for taking those chances because those worlds are a lot of fun to be in. This is a very dark world, a very gothic type vibe. It actually has a lot of like True Detective season 1 type vibes to it. And it's the sort of thing where if this just isn't a fun world to be in, or if it's very just like melancholy and sad, it can lose people. And I think that's kind of what happened with this. Is it's just a very dark, traumatic world to be living in. And if you don't have enough intrigue in what's actually going on with the story, people are going to become less interested. Now, I don't think that takes away that this was, I think, a really well done show, and that, again, the performances I think were great, and there's a lot to like about it. Especially, and the way I probably like most is that this is probably going to be it. They're not going to make a season 2 of this show.
Yeah, Casey Boys confirmed that already. They're not doing second season. Even he said Amy Adams doesn't want to revisit the character, which I can blame her. It's dark,
very dark. Yeah, why don't we jump to the finale, I guess, because like you said, the middle was kind of plotting and not super interesting at all the time. What did you make of I guess, the penultimate and the season finale episodes?
Yes. The payoff moments, again, they didn't really hit for me, and like they should have, because I thought it was really well done how they revealed what was going on with Adora. And then the whole first half of the finale, I don't know, I just found Camille's intent to intentionally be poisoned really like grating to watch. I just found it really frustrating from a plot perspective,
Yeah.
But I thought the way they revealed for Adora was cool. And then obviously I think that the last 10 minutes are really, really strong. Obviously a really well done fake out for anyone who hadn't read the novel.
Yep.
And I think, the luring you into the false sense of security, where you think the resolution was smart and well done. But again, because I wasn't super invested in any of the characters, and like I loathed Adora, regardless of what she actually did and do, it was tough to I don't know. It was good. Like it's more a show like I respect than I was super entertained by,
Yeah, it's so I found myself in the last 10 minutes after, they were living in St. Louis together. That's kind of why are they showing all this? I don't really like I once I know that they're established, I don't really care too much about like what their lives are like there or how they're getting on. But then it made a lot of sense once you see like the mid-credit scene and kind of how like what the twist was to all of this and what was really going on with Emma. But again, it's the sort of thing where you like my first thought was I'd really like to go back and watch the show and see like the performances and how everything is now knowing what the twist is. But it's also a show I don't really want to go back and watch again this soon. Maybe in the future, I'd want to revisit it, but God knows with how much TV we have to get to already, that's not going to happen.
Right. Well, that's one of the things everyone's kind of sharing today is that the answers were in front of us the whole time. You know, like when Amma was quoting Machiavelli, you know, when they were there, when they found the dead girl, you know, her and her friends. It's like there are all these little things, but at the same point, it's like I just don't know if it matters to me. Like the obvious comparison, like it's funny because like we all compared this to Big Little Lies because it was HBO miniseries with John Mark-Foley, right?
Right.
It's really, like you said, more like True Detective. It's a more darker, introspective show. Big Little Lies is just flat out more entertaining because it's very campy and it lets the performers just have fun. And another show that the plot wasn't as, you know, important as, you know, you would expect from a mystery type show, but there was definitely more plot movement in that. So yeah, it's I think it's definitely worth watching, especially if you appreciate TV, because again, it doesn't like it's not like something like Mosaic that was on HBO earlier this year, which is kind of a, you know, by the numbers mystery show. Doesn't do anything that unique, right? This does plenty unique, and it's maybe it's just my expectations or my desires for the show were just off base, you know. So again, it's a show I think is good. I think Amy Adams definitely deserves an Emmy nomination in the limited series category. Come next year, of course, for that award cycle. So it's because it's only a going to be a one and done mini series, not going to actually get renewed like Big Little Lies was or End of the Fucking World on Netflix was. I think it's a show I still would recommend people to at least give it a shot.
Yeah, like I said, the performances alone are worth watching, and I think there's so much about the show that's well done, just the way it's created, the way it's shot, the cutbacks, like you said, there's enough there to warrant liking it, even if at parts it's a little boring. So, something that was not boring, but question scratching my head, but something I know that you stand for, man. First Reformed. Thank God for video on demand. Finally got around to seeing it after that. After I missed it in theaters. Paul Schrader. I don't even know what film this is for him. He's been around forever. Since like the 70s?
Right. Well, he's most famous for co-writing or writing Taxi Driver,
yep.
Raging Bull, Last Temptation of Christ. First.
Yeah, he ran in that whole group with like Scorsese, De Palma, Spielberg. I think he was close to it too. Yeah. So, I mean, this is sitting at 93% Rotten Tomatoes. It's gotten a lot of buzz this year. Is definitely Oscar worthy. A lot of people heralding Hawke's performance in this. Obviously, Ethan Hawke is the lead. I know that you said this isn't your top 3 films, and you're not sure where, you know, what order that's in right now. But what do you like about this movie? Why is this a movie that is getting such high praise this year?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember as soon as I went to see it. And from the very first shot, I'm like, oh, the aspect ratio isn't like everything else I see, you know? Interesting. That was a choice he made. I took on my phone and I wrote down first shot aspect ratio of when he's like the close-up of the church, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, this is definitely a movie that is, you know, it was particularly directed at. And again, like I knew a lot of the hype going in, so I was kind of expecting that. Then once you go in and then it's a very simple story, you know. But I think because Hawke gives such a measured performance about a priest having a crisis of faith and having that consume him, seeing that pan out, I thought was superb, and just the way he grapples with his emotions throughout the film. I thought the voiceover when he was writing in his diary was incredibly effective. And for the ending, I took a lot of balls. There's a lot of talk about other potential endings, but I really fucking liked that ending in that dream sequence right before it. So yeah, I just think I thought the whole movie was just really excellent, and shout out friend of the pod, Marty O'Donnell. He's actually someone who I recommend the film to. He was excited to see it, and he did not like the film. He thought it was too heavy-handed at the end, and it didn't work for him, although he respected the ending. So it was interesting to hear that perspective. But for me, it totally worked, and I thought it was really exceptional.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with films that are made in this transcendental, I don't know, format way, however you want to put it, style. And, kind of all the research I did on this, because I did a lot of reading afterwards to try to make sure I was kind of taking away from me what they were trying to, or if I was missing something. And apparently there's two movies, Country Priest and Winter's Light, that Schrader pulls a lot from for the plot and kind of the way that he moves the narrative along, and especially with like the diary and the crisis of faith based on a recent political issue. In this, it was global warming and pollution and corruption, things like that. Yeah. So it touches on a lot, and I felt so confused at the end of this. I was like, am I watching a dream? Is this actually happening? Especially after, and that's probably part of the point of this, is that it's supposed to be about how faith can shake you, and faith can bring things to such a higher form or really tear things down. That's kind of like what that dream sequence is about, is that they're so, or at least that's the way I interpret it, is that they're so small within this, larger scheme of things, where this is really just a little moment. But the ending was a tough thing for me to make sense of, and I'm still not sure where I land on it. I guess I'll ask you, how did you interpret that ending?
Yeah, well, to talk about it in a cliche way, it's really Lynchian, right? It's just
right
because it's obscure, because it's really surreal.
And the rest of the movie didn't hit me that way. That's probably why I felt confused.
Right, yeah, it really builds up at the end with that dream green screen sequence, right? When it
lying on top or face to face.
Well, it's just funny because it's like, what was his name? Ethan Hawke's character's name?
Ernst Toller.
Ernst, yeah. When he it's funny because he's like he was a man of the cloth, post military, right? But like you didn't really find his faith until the end, and I don't know. I guess that's just how I read it. I think it's an ambitious way to end a movie, because like all the build up to that ending is like, all right, he's gonna fucking do it. He's gonna go blow up a church, right? With the suicide vest. And I think there were other drafts thrown out there. I forget. Schrader shared one of these endings, and then one other one I think was just a theory, where I think there was one where it was like similar, like a dreamy ending, but it was like floating like body parts or something as if it did blow up. And I thought the other way was that he would try and do it, and he would fail, and he would just like fall into despair or something.
Mm-hmm.
So big movie just to think about, where the character could have went, at the end.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I mean, I guess there was also one ending which is very like traditional in this style, where he drinks the Drano and she walks in and he dies right there, and there's like the Christ on the cross above him. So there's a lot that could have happened with it, and I think where I feel almost kind of like, I don't know if this makes sense, because I saw him as a man of such faith throughout the whole thing, like almost to the point where like he needed to just like lighten up a little bit on his faith, be like, man, you really are taking on the weight of everything here. And like, that's kind of what was tearing him apart, was everything just seemed so heavy. And he felt like there was so much wrong that the church wasn't taking action on, or that he couldn't change. Right. And then what he finds salvation in is just this widow, this woman, this other person who was like the only, like, I feel bad for her. Amanda Seyfried played that role really well. Every other guy in her life was falling apart, and she was the only strong one. So I guess in a way that's like the opposite of Lynchian, because Lynch always makes like kind of not so strong female characters who kind of like lead to like a man's demise, whereas like this is a really strong woman who kind of saves them. But I mean, Cedric the Entertainer also, I thought the scenes with him were fantastic, and I'd never seen him like show these kind of chops.
Really good.
I mean, there was a lot to like about this movie, and it's definitely well done. I'm sitting with it, trying to figure out if it's a movie that I think was just good or if it really hit for me.
Yeah, no, again, I think the message behind it, like, again, as I said, like our friend of the pod, Marty, it was too blunt for him,
Yeah.
Maybe for you, it was too obtuse. You know, it was too unclear. You know, I think that's like this is a tiny ass movie that A24 picked up, right? Paul Schrader is 71 years old. He hasn't made like a standout film solo in quite some time too. It's really returned the form for him. But this is there's not wide appeal in a story like this. But you know, and I just think Ethan Hawke's performance taking the story, I don't know, just really sat with me. Like I remember I sat in the theater for a while just thinking about the movie after I saw it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It definitely makes you think. And if, you know, we talk about, especially this being like the other movie I think that's up there this year that made me think in this way is probably Sorry to Bother You. You know, and I guess Black Klansman in a way too had that effect. These sort of movies are made to do that, made to make you think. So if nothing else, this movie achieved its goal, and it really makes you think about the world and especially faith and spirituality. I think Hawke will probably, or at least deserves an Oscar nom. I mean, I can't say he probably will because we haven't seen the other films and other performances he'll be up against, but he's got to at least be in the discussion for a nomination.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, I just think it's I don't know. I think it's really strong. I think Schrader's script is actually really admirable too. All of the scenes in Cedric the Entertainer's like big successful church, I think those really work for like helping push Ernest towards his radicalization, and like the moments he had with I forget her name, but like someone he used to have like with who was at that church, right? Where like he like pushes her away. And I thought that was really
Esther.
Well done. Yeah, Esther, that's right. And yeah, I don't know. I just think also I thought the original message, the whole like driving force of this, you know, environmentalism, things like that, and like you know, like environmental terrorism, the other end of it, like I also find that like really pressing and you know, relevant to today too. So it's I don't know. I just thought it was really exceptional. It's somewhere in my top 3 right now.
Yeah, definitely see it. It's on demand right now. I'm sure it'll probably be on one of the streaming services before the end of the year. So something that we can definitely we'll definitely be talking about the end of the year and definitely be, I think, revisiting just in terms of the performances and also the thoughtfulness but behind it. So check it out. I guess my last thought, I thought it was really effective not using music except for, you know, like the choir singing, and then at the end when Esther was singing. Also, another thing I noticed is like that last shot, the movie is very still, like the way it's shot, it's not really moving very much, and then that last shot is like spinning, which I think was very effective to like give that feeling of like, I don't know, emotion and almost like salvation in a way. So yeah, definitely check it out. Paul Schrader, this is probably one of his best works I can remember seeing from him. So
yeah, definitely one of his best movies in like 20-something years in terms of the movie he actually directed.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Crazy. So that we're gonna wrap up there for the week. What do we got next week, Dave? What's on the docket?
Yeah, next week we're gonna talk about Papillon, the remake film of the 1973 classic. This new remake with Charlie Hunnam and Rami Malek, two we're generally fans of. We're also going to talk about BTS and the rise of K-pop in the West. Getting you that Asian content. Shout out Crazy Rich Asians. 2 weeks in a row, number 1. We'll probably get to that Blood Orange album, Negro Swan, that just dropped. Maybe some other stuff, some fall preview action. We'll look ahead. A lot of stuff coming out in the fall. So we'll, you know, I think we got a lot planned. This Friday, actually, there's some interesting releases too. I don't know if we'll get to all these right away or if we get to them, but like Jack Ryan is premiering on Amazon, and Ozark season 2 is coming out on Netflix. And Meghan Trainor is also releasing a new album, and I've actually liked some of her lead singles from this. So plenty of stuff to talk about.
Plenty of stuff to talk about. Dave, I don't know why you had to qualify Crazy Rich Asians as an Asian movie, but
oh yeah, shout out our comments on that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's the representation doesn't matter at all. So every conversation that's being had around it, don't worry about it. Anyways, hit us up. Nowstalgia Pod on Twitter. Subscribe below. SoundCloud.com/NowstalgiaPod. Give us all the feedback. We appreciate hearing from you. we'll catch you next week. Peace out.